So we all just watched Will Byers. The Will Byers, the kid who got kidnapped back in Season 1, the one who's been tormented for literally 5 seasons. We just watched him absolutely destroy multiple Demogorgons with his mind. And I'm sitting here at 3 a.m., my jaw on the floor, because the Duffer Brothers just pulled off one of the most satisfying character arcs I've seen since Luke Skywalker ignited that green lightsaber in Return of the Jedi. But here's the thing. Will's powers aren't what we think they are. The Duffer Brothers just dropped an interview explaining how his abilities actually work, and it's way more complicated and way more dangerous than anyone realizes. So, buckle up, because we're about to break down everything we know about Will's powers, what makes them different from Eleven's, and why the final battle might come down to one terrifying question. Can Will control these powers, or will Vecna control him? Let me set the scene for you. Episode 4, Sorcerer. Our heroes are getting absolutely demolished by Demogorgons at the military access control zone. Mike, Lucas, Robin, they're about to become monster chow. 11 and Hopper are stuck in the Upside Down. It's looking bad, like Empire Strikes Back bad. And then Vecna, who's been haunting Will since he was 12 years old, shows up and tells him something brutal. He says he chose Will specifically because he was the weakest kid in Hawkins, the easiest to break, the one who'd never fight back. Now, if you're like me, you've watched Will get pushed around for 5 seasons. He's been possessed, traumatized, and turned into basically a supernatural GPS for the Mind Flayer. The kid's been through it. But this moment, this is where everything shifts. Robin had given Will this speech earlier. She told him about accepting herself, about how she finally felt whole when she stopped being afraid of who she really was. And in this moment, with death literally seconds away, Will remembers that. He remembers building Castle Byers with Jonathan. He remembers meeting Mike for the first time. He remembers his mom telling him she'd never stop fighting for him. And then, his eyes go white, just like Vecna's. He raises his hands, and those Demogorgons, they freeze in midair, and Will, our Will, snaps their limbs like breadsticks and drops them dead on the ground. The nosebleed afterward? Chef's kiss. It's the exact same visual language they use for 11, except this time it's the kid everyone underestimated. Noah Schnapp, the actor who plays Will, said he texted the Duffer Brothers after filming that scene, telling them how grateful he was. Because finally, after being the victim for so long, Will gets his hero moment. And man, it hits. So here's where it gets really interesting. Because after that episode dropped, Reddit absolutely exploded. Everyone was asking, does Will have the same powers as 11? Is he as strong as Vecna? Can he open doors with his mind? Can he fly? The Duffer Brothers answered these questions directly, and the truth is both cooler and more terrifying than anyone expected. Will doesn't have powers like 11 or Vecna. He can't move objects with his mind just because he wants to. What Will can do is tap into the hive mind. Remember how he's been connected to the Upside Down since Season 1? That connection never went away. It's been dormant, but it's always been there. And now, for the first time, Will's figured out how to use it. Ross Duffer explained it like this. Will is channeling VECNA'S powers through their connection. He's basically hijacking the hive mind, the same network that Vecna uses to control all the monsters in the Upside Down. Matt Duffer added that Will can manipulate anything within the hive. Demogorgons, Demodogs, probably even those creepy Mind Flayer vines. But there's a catch. His powers are completely proximity-based. What does that mean? It means Will only has powers when he's physically close to the hive mind, when he's near Vecna, near a portal, or near something connected to the Upside Down. When he was in California during Season 4, he couldn't feel anything. No connection, no powers. But the moment he returned to Hawkins, that spider sense on the back of his neck kicked right back in. Think of it like this. If 11 is like a Jedi with the Force flowing through her at all times, Will is more like someone who can tap into a dark side nexus when he's standing in the right place. It's borrowed power, which makes it unpredictable and dangerous. And here's the scariest part. Vecna is on the other end of that connection, which means, theoretically, he could pull an Uno-reverse and take control right back. Now, if you haven't seen Stranger Things: The First Shadow, that's the prequel stage play that's been running in London and on Broadway, You're missing a huge piece of this puzzle, because that play reveals where all these powers actually come from, and it completely recontextualizes everything we thought we knew about Vecna. Here's the deal. When Henry Creel was 8 years old, he was living in Rachel, Nevada, near a military base. And one day, while exploring some caves, he accidentally stumbled into one of Dr. Brenner's experiments. The equipment activated and transported him to Dimension X, which is basically the OG version of the Upside Down, the pure dimension where the Mind Flayer and Demogorgons come from. Young Henry was stuck there for 12 hours, and during that time he was exposed to Mind Flayer particles. They literally entered his body, changed his blood type, and gave him psychic abilities. But here's the thing. Henry didn't develop these powers on his own. The Mind Flayer gave them to him. In exchange, it used his body as a host. Fast forward to Season 5, and we see that there's a cave in VECNA'S mind, a memory he's absolutely terrified of. Max figures out she can hide there, because VECNA won't follow her inside. The Duffer Brothers confirm this is the same Nevada cave from the play. It's VECNA'S worst memory, because it's where he was first flayed by the Mind Flayer, where he lost control and became something else entirely. And this is the part that should terrify us about Will, because Will went through almost the exact same thing. In Season 1, VECNA took him to the Upside Down and pumped him full of Mind Flayer particles. That's what created their connection. That's why Will could see what the Mind Flayer saw in Season 2, and that's why he has powers now. The difference? Will still has his humanity. He hasn't been corrupted by the Mind Flayer like Henry was, but the connection is there. And it's only getting stronger the more he uses these abilities. So let's talk about 11 for a second, because her powers come from a completely different place, right? Well, yes and no. The first shadow play reveals that Dr. Brenner couldn't just recreate what happened to Henry naturally. He couldn't find more Mind Flayer particles or send more kids to Dimension X. So instead, he did something brilliant and horrifying. He took Henry's blood, the blood that had been altered by the Mind Flayer, and he injected it into pregnant women. That's how 11 got her powers. That's how 8, who we saw return in Season 5, got her powers. That's how all the kids at Hawkins' lab got their abilities. They're essentially using a diluted version of Henry's connection to the Mind Flayer, filtered through his altered blood. This is why 11 has always struggled against Vecna. Her powers are second-hand, cloned from Henry's blood. They don't come directly from the source. When she beat him at the Hawkins lab massacre, it was because of pure rage and emotion, the same technique he taught her, plus the fact that Henry hadn't used his powers in years because of that chip Brenner implanted in his neck. But Will's connection is direct. He's tapped straight into the hive mind, just like Vecna. Which means, in theory, if he can master these powers, he might actually be able to go toe-to-toe with Vecna in a way that 11 can't. The question is, can he learn to control them in time? And can he do it without losing himself the way Henry did? Here's where things get really intense. The Duffer Brothers have been very clear in interviews that Will using these powers is extremely risky. Yes, he can control Demogorgons and potentially other creatures in the hive mind, but every time he taps into that connection, he's opening himself up to Vecna's influence. Matt Duffer said something that's been keeping me up at night. Vecna completely underestimates Will. He sees him as weak, incapable of achieving anything great, so he underestimates him in that moment. Whether that's going to happen again, you'll have to watch Volume 2. Translation: Vecna's going to figure out what Will can do. And when he does, he's going to try to use that connection against him. We've seen this before in Season 2, when the Mind Flayer used Will as a spy. But now the stakes are so much higher, because Will's actively using these powers. One wrong move, one moment where Vecna seizes control, and Will could end up hurting the people he loves. And let's talk about those 12 kids Vecna's been taking, including Holly Wheeler. He's got them all hooked up to vines in this weird inner sanctum, pumping them full of Mind Flayer particles, just like he did to Will in Season 1, which means those kids might all develop powers too. Imagine an army of psychic kids, all connected to the hive mind, all under Vecna's control. That's the nightmare scenario we're heading toward. The Duffer Brothers said Will's powers are going to keep evolving through the rest of the season. What we saw in episode 4 was just the beginning. But here's what gives me hope. Robin's speech to Will wasn't just about accepting himself. It was about finding strength in who you really are, not who others think you should be. Will spent his whole life being told he was weak, being told he was a target, being told he needed protection. But the truth is, he's always been strong. He survived the Upside Down alone as a 12-year-old. He fought off the Mind Flayer's possession. He's been the party's secret weapon this whole time, and he's only now realizing it. The final 3 episodes of Season 5 drop on Christmas Day, and the finale hits on New Year's Eve. And based on what the Duffers are saying, we're going to get more connections to the first shadow play, more reveals about that Nevada cave, and a confrontation between Will and Vecna that could determine the fate of Hawkins, and possibly the entire world. Look, I don't know about you, but I've been watching this show since 2016. I've seen every theory, every twist, every heartbreak. And this might be the most satisfying payoff they've ever done. Will Byers, the kid who started it all, the one everyone wanted to save, is now the one who might save everyone else. But the cost might be higher than any of us are ready for, because if Vecna takes control of Will, even for a moment, the results could be catastrophic. And after everything this kid has been through, the idea that he might have to sacrifice himself to end this, that's the kind of bittersweet ending that would absolutely destroy me in the best way possible. Drop a comment and tell me, do you think Will can beat Vecna with these powers, or is this connection too dangerous? And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button, because I've got so many more Season 5 breakdowns coming your way. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss what happens next. See you in the Upside Down.